Story 1. I was 24. She was 36. Family friend. I just messaged her on Facebook spontaneously, and she asked what was for breakfast. Told her chorizo and eggs, and she asked if she could join. I obliged. The relationship lasted 10 years. Story 2. I went to a bar with my mother when I was 23. The doorman asked me for my number. He was good-looking and in great shape, but obviously much older than me. He was 37. I gave it a shot. We dated for 8 months. He seemed great, had a day job working with disabled individuals, was very stable, good with money, even-tempered, and health-conscious. However, he was the biggest cheater ever. Edit. Thanks for all the karma, Gary. Story 3. I was an ex-coworker. I did some computer work for her one day. That day turned into my only, like the start of a movie hookup. I was working on her MacBook and she mentioned her Photos app was very slow. I opened up the app, saw tons of not safe for work selfies. I looked away and she just smiled and said she had been having some fun recently. I decided to be brave. So, do you want to hook up? Narrator. She did, in fact, want to hook up. She was about 10 years older, but she kept in shape and much fun was had for a few months. Story 4. My boyfriend was 17 years younger. I was 50 at the time. He was and is one of the sweetest humans I've ever met. He was getting over a divorce when we met. I had a small business, a home, a community I loved. He wanted to move back to the Colorado mountains and live in a cabin. He wanted to marry me, and we would be so happy in the wilderness. Sigh. No. We text regularly still. He always tells me he still loves me. To be honest, I love him too. But a woman in her 70s is not a good match for a healthy man in his 50s, and I'm smart enough to know that. Story 5. I met a woman on Tinder who is 8 years younger than my mom. She was teasing me, calling me a MILF hunter, and I was teasing her that I have the same age gap with her and her child. I invited her on a date. She told me that she was pretty sure I wouldn't come. Vomit. Now, we have been dating for a year. Story 6. A 26-year-old woman pursued me when I was 36. I thought she was too young for me and kept the brakes on for months, despite thinking she was very attractive. To sum up, we have been married for a long time now. Story 7. I met a woman on Tinder who is 10 years older than me. I'm 34, and she is 44. It felt weird at first, but I get along with her better than any of my previous partners. Age isn't anything but a number is a real thing, to be honest. Story 8. I was 20, and she was 49. I was hanging out at a bar when she walked in. She recognized some of the regulars, and I did too. We struck up a conversation and surprisingly found we had a lot in common. We dated for a few weeks, but then it just fizzled out. Story 9. Met online in a massively multiplayer online game. Our play styles complemented each other, so we started grouping together every time we were both online. The more we grouped, the more we talked. Real-life subjects started coming up more and more. The more we learned about each other, the more attracted we became to each other. We became extremely close. It took 2 years to realize there was a 20-year age difference between us. Decided to meet up in real life. Once we were together, age didn't matter at all. That relationship lasted 8 years and only ended because both of us were too stubborn to move away from our respective families. This was all before voice chat was a thing in massively multiplayer online games, or online at all. Story 10. When I was in high school, a friend's mom got divorced. We had a brief thing. It shouldn't have happened, and if anyone had found out, she would have been in a lot of legal trouble. It had a profound effect on my ability to have normal relationships that includes both sexual and just friends in general. I learned to hide relationships and to not feel comfortable talking about them. It also disrupted my relationship with my family because they didn't know and didn't understand my erratic behavior at that time. It also has led to me mostly having inappropriate or in other ways poor choices in partners. Story 11. When I was a teenager, I got involved with a hobby that peaked in popularity around the time I was born. In college, which is around 30 years ago, I started attending conventions and meeting other devotees in person. Most of them were 15 to 20 years older than me. I also started being part of an internet community. Almost all of my friends that I made as an adult were from this same hobby. Some people treated me as a peer, some as a little sister hanging around. A bunch of us all traveled to this one event. My husband was a friend of the people I was traveling with. It's like I didn't meet a stranger, but a vetted, respected member of our community. When we met, I was 21 and he was 40. We got together a year later. Now we are 49 and 6'8". We just celebrated our 22nd anniversary. The first other devotee I met was when I was 16 and this guy was 29. He lent me books and other media, we hung out a lot in public, and he gave me rides a couple of times. Looking back, it was strictly above board, but I was lucky. We're still in touch. Story 12. I went to see his band play with a friend of mine, and she made us go up and talk to them. He definitely did not know how young I was. Dark dive bar. I had a lot of makeup on, and I'm tall. We added each other on Facebook and then met up a few times and got along very, very well. I made sure he wasn't a creep. Now we're married. There's an 11-year difference. Story 13. I had a fantastic relationship with a woman a little over 20 years older than me when I was in my early to mid-20s. She was the older sister of an older colleague that I had become mates with in my first job out of university. I met her out with him one night and we clicked, and that night it started. I was reasonably fresh out of what had been a taxing relationship, my first serious girlfriend, who I had been with for most of university, and this really wonderful lady was very keen to get out of a dead bedroom marriage on its last legs. We saw each other sporadically, and when opportunity allowed over the next 2 or 3 years until I took up with another serious girlfriend. Subsequently, we still saw each other occasionally at social occasions over the next 15 years before losing touch a bit. She became less healthy in her 60s and was out less. I still heard of her from her brother, who I remained good friends with, and always asked after her, as she did me, and well wishes were always exchanged through him both ways. I am 54 now, and sadly, she died of cancer a couple of years ago. I wish I had seen her again before she passed. We always had a very special place in our hearts for each other. Story 14. I met her on America Online. I was 18 and she was 55. God, was that fun. She had a nice apartment down by the lake. That was one of the most fun times in my life. Story 15. Being 40 with a 28-year-old girlfriend was fun. We met at work and clicked. However, after trying out a relationship, we realized we were just too far apart mentally. I don't want a partner to whom I have to explain everything, feeling like I'm being overbearing, but they all say, "No, that's fine. Tell me what to do." I want someone who can tell me what to do and maybe have a little argument now and then if we don't agree. Story 16. Chatted with her at the club and it went from there. I'm 25. She's 39. I balanced it by having a girlfriend who is 13 years younger recently. To clarify, the two relationships are nearly 20 years apart. I wasn't dating a 12-year-old. Story 17. I'm 30 and he is 48. We have been together for 2 years. Met him on Grindr as a casual hookup and fell in love with each other. I left my job and moved with him 400 kilometers away from home. I have never been happier. Story 18. When I was 43 years old and newly out of a long-term relationship, I had a couple of short relationships, a few months apart, slightly more than flings, with a 27-year-old and a 29-year-old. The 27-year-old was long distance, and we met because we had mutual friends on Facebook, and she specifically messaged me to flirt. It ended because it was long distance, really. No harm, no foul. We still are slightly in touch. The 29-year-old I met on Tinder and was a little fast to push for the boyfriend/girlfriend label. I broke it off because, frankly, I eventually got the impression that she was not single and I was her side piece. Both admitted to having a thing for older guys, and neither lasted long enough for any age gap stuff to get weird. About 6 months later, I met a woman 5 years older than me. We've been together for 6 years and married for 1. Story 19. Met at work. She was 38. I was 24. Both female. Thought she was straight, so did she. We were friends. I always fancied her, but didn't know she felt the same. It only took 3.5 years before she told me how she felt. And we have been together ever since. Best relationship I have ever had. She's my best mate and the most wonderful person I have ever met. Age doesn't really come into it. We're just people who fell in love. Story 20. I fell in love with her the moment I saw her, and I have been hers ever since. It has not always been smooth, and we have not always been together. But what matters to me is I am going home to her in just a little while, 42 years after that first day. Story 21. When I was 17, I slept with the woman who worked at the car dealership where I bought my first car. She was 31 and married at that time, which I didn't know. She was living with a friend, and we were kind of seeing each other. Then one day, there was a brand new man's watch in her room, which was clearly a gift she was going to give to someone. Stupidly, I thought it might be for me, but she explained to me that it was for her husband. They were trying to reconcile, and so we couldn't see each other anymore. Good, because I hated that stupid watch anyway. Story 22. I was a youthful 21 and worked in a local pub. She was a 46-year-old lady who drank there on the weekends. She made it very well known that she fancied me, and one day, I had finished my shift at 4 p.m. in time for an England football match and had ordered a pint. At which point, she came over and again told me she found me attractive. I thanked her and went out for a smoke. I was outside having a smoke and she came out and asked for a lighter. I obliged. She lit her cigarette, kissed me, and asked me to go back to hers. I thought about it for 10 seconds and agreed. I didn't even finish my pint and jumped in her car. We went back, and I had the best experience I've ever had. This was in 2001. We showered together afterward. Another time, I just got accosted by someone at a work do, and we found ourselves in the cellar of the venue we were drinking in. She knew the code on the keypad to open the cellar door. A bit chilly in there though, but naughty fun was had over the kegs. This lady was only older than me by a few years, though. I'd go on, but this isn't the appropriate forum for such stories. Story 23. I am 28 and she is 42. We are having a baby girl next month. Together for 2 years in January. She is the greatest partner I could have ever imagined, and she came with 3 kids that all love me. Story 24. My husband is 20 years older than me. We worked together. He asked me out, I said no. We became friends and then best friends. Then, I realized I was in love with him. We have been inseparable for almost a decade now. Story 25. I went back to school in the evening to get my college degree and met a woman doing the same. We started dating and hit it off. I was 27. She was 9 years older at 36. We had our wedding 2 years later and have been happily married for 38 years. Story 26. I was 25. She was 36. We met on World of Warcraft and she lived half the country away, United States. We were about 950 miles or 1,528 kilometers apart. Started out with just liking each other's company and ended up with me flying out to her state for Christmas. All of this started in 2005. We had our 10th wedding anniversary this year. Story 27. I went to a social dance congress specifically for salsa in her city. We met randomly through a mutual acquaintance, started dating within a month, and got married a year later. We now have 2 wonderful children. She is about 20 years younger than me. It just happened. Story 28. There's a 10-year age gap between us. It actually wasn't intentional at all. I was homeless at the time and he was basically a stranger. He invited me into his home and I was terrified of him to begin with, but slowly, I began to feel affection for him. We've been dating and living together for a year now. I've definitely grown to care for him, and initially I wasn't even attracted to him. I guess it's like that phrase, familiarity breeds affection. I know our whole relationship sounds crazy, which is why he's never told his family the details of how we met. I'm not sure what story he told them about how we met, but he certainly didn't say, I picked up this homeless girl, and we started dating. Story 29. 21-year difference. Lots in common. Our parents were the same age. She had many fine qualities. Conversations were most stimulating. Ultimately, though, she liked being mean. A Karen, if you will. I don't know why the haircut didn't tip me off. I explained she had choices, but she chose meanness. That was the end of it. Story 30. A tale as old as time. I dated one older guy, and in doing so, met friends and acquaintances through him that I would later go on to date, until I realized I was being used and got myself out of those circles. Story 31. She worked at a coffee shop down the street, and I saw her 2 to 3 times a week for multiple months. 2 weeks before she moved to another city and changed jobs. She asked if I wanted to hang out with her on a Friday night, as we had a good connection. When I came to pick her up after her Friday shift, she told me she was into me but wasn't really interested in being in a relationship, as she wanted to focus on her university course. I kind of agreed because she was a bit young for me. She was 22, and I was 34, and I didn't want to date someone still in school. We spent all Friday night and Saturday morning together. This went on for another weekend, and then she left for the city. We never exchanged our numbers or any social media because we didn't want to push it further. Never heard from her since then. It was fun for what it was. Story 32. I met him at work, and I had a crush on him and would flirt with him here and there. We went to a party with other coworkers, and they knew I liked him. They tried inviting him to the party, but then his friend, who was texting him, told me his age. He lied, saying he was 25, and I guess he was told I was older too. So we went on our first date and learned about each other's ages. I was 19 and he was 34. By then, we had fallen for each other and were together for 5 years. Story 33. I was 29 and this gorgeous woman in her 50s started chatting with me at the bar, trying to figure out what actor I resembled. We were both quite intoxicated, and she said, "I'm going to fantasize about you later." To which I responded, "Take me home and you won't have to." We ended up spending the night together, after which I chose not to keep in contact. However, this experience led me to change my dating age preferences to 45 to 55 when I got back to my home city. It has been an exciting experience.